CoA combines with oxaloacetate present in mitochondria to form citrate. In the presence of an enzyme, citrate synthase, that is the first reaction that is taking place in mitochondria. Why? Because acetyl-CoA cannot be transported via mitochondrial membrane. That's why it is converting into citrate. Citrate can be transported across mitochondrial membrane via a tricarboxylic transporter and it enters into cytoplasm. In the cytoplasm, again, citrate in the presence of one enzyme ATP citrate lyase. Here, two ATP molecules are utilized. In the presence of an enzyme ATP citrate lyase, citrate is getting converted into oxaloacetate and acetyl-CoA. In that way, acetyl-CoA is released to cytoplasm from mitochondria. That oxaloacetate, what happens? Oxaloacetate either getting converted into malate or malate is getting converted into pyruvate. Oxaloacetate in the conversion of malate, it requires malate dehydrogenase enzyme. One point you can understand, malate dehydrogenase enzyme is present both in cytoplasm as well as in mitochondria. Okay, that malate can be transported across mitochondrial membrane. It enters into mitochondria. Again, in mitochondria, malate is reconverted to oxaloacetate in the presence of mitochondrial malate dehydrogenase. In that way, again, oxaloacetate is available for combination of acetyl-CoA. In that way, pathway repeats. Finally, what happens in that pathway? One more process is taking place. Malate is getting converted to pyruvate. In that process, NADP is getting converted to NADPH. Why? Because for fatty acid synthesis, NADPH is again required. So where you are getting NADPH? Again, in the citrate transport pathway only, you are getting NADPH2. That pyruvate again enters into mitochondria. Again, from pyruvate, acetyl-CoA is generated. In that way, process is repeated, and finally you are getting acetyl-CoA and NADPH. That's why transport, how it is taking place. The starting material for de novo synthesis is acetyl-CoA. Acetyl-CoA is formed inside mitochondria from pyruvate, or it is formed from fatty acid oxidation. But inner mitochondrial membrane is not freely permeable to acetyl-CoA. Hence, acetyl-CoA units are transported to cytoplasm as citrate. Citrate is transported from mitochondria by a special transporter called tricarboxylic acid transporter. In the cytoplasm, citrate is cleaved to oxaloacetate and acetyl-CoA in the presence of an enzyme ATP citrate lyase. Oxaloacetate can return to mitochondria as either malate or pyruvate in the presence of an enzyme malate dehydrogenase or malic enzyme, either of that. Okay, again you can see here in this slide clearly how in mitochondria from pyruvate if acetyl-CoA is formed. There in that slide you have seen how from fatty acid oxidation acetyl-CoA is formed here. That is okay. From here pyruvate with the help of pyruvate dehydrogenase, you have learned it in carbohydrate metabolism, right? From pyruvate acetyl-CoA is formed. That acetyl-CoA combines with oxaloacetate that is already present in mitochondria, or from pyruvate, one more carboxylation reaction, pyruvate in the presence of pyruvate carboxylase, oxaloacetate can be formed. Please understand, pyruvate has many metabolic fates. Metabolic fates of pyruvate is an important short question. Pyruvate can form in anaerobic condition lactate. That is a major pathway. Otherwise, pyruvate can form acetyl-CoA by dehydrogenase enzyme, pyruvate dehydrogenase enzyme. Or pyruvate can undergo pyruvate carboxylation reaction to form in the presence of pyruvate carboxylase enzyme to form oxaloacetate. Either of that pyruvate can take pathway, and that 2-carbon acetyl-CoA combines with 4-carbon oxaloacetate to form a 6-carbon citric acid in the presence of an enzyme citrate synthase. That you know. Citrate is easily permeable to the mitochondrial membrane. That's why it transports mitochondrial membrane and enters into cytoplasm. In the cytoplasm, again 6-carbon citrate splits into oxaloacetate as well as acetyl-CoA in the presence of an enzyme ATP citrate lyase. In that pathway, ATP is released. 2 ATP molecules are utilized. What happens to oxaloacetate in the cytoplasm? Oxaloacetate either converts into malate in the presence of cytoplasmic malate dehydrogenase, or oxaloacetate or malate can convert into pyruvate in the presence of malic enzyme. In that process, NADPH is generated. NADPH can also be generated from HMP pathway. Please understand, you have learned in HMP pathway, one of the importance of HMP pathway is generation of NADPH. And pyruvate, what happens? Pyruvate enters from cytoplasm to mitochondria. Again, that completely pathway repeats, and it is used for fatty acid synthesis in that way. First, transport of acetyl-CoA, you have understood how transportation is taking place from mitochondria to cytoplasm in the presence of two important enzymes, citrate synthetase and ATP citrate lyase. These are the two key enzymes for transportation. In that transportation, two ATP molecules are utilized and one NADPH is generated. Please, transportation of acetyl-CoA is an important. Now, having understood transportation of acetyl-CoA, next stage of fatty acid synthesis is carboxylation of acetyl-CoA. Means carbon dioxide is added to acetyl-CoA. How? Because elongation of fatty acid has to take place. It occurs by addition of two carbon atoms at a time as a sequential addition. And now here in fatty acid synthesis, two carbon units are added as a 3 carbon malonyl units that are again obtained from acetyl-CoA. Hence, acetyl-CoA is carboxylated to form malonyl-CoA. First reaction is acetyl-CoA is undergoing carboxylation in the presence of carbon dioxide, and important enzyme is acetyl-CoA carboxylase. And important coenzyme is biotin. Please remember, for any carboxylation reaction, biotin is coenzyme. Please remember certain points. If you remember, it becomes easy in biochemistry. Okay. As a hint giving to you, any carboxylation reactions, whenever you are having any carboxylation reaction, just put biotin as coenzyme. Any phosphorylation reaction, magnesium is coenzyme. Kinases are the main enzymes, and coenzymes are magnesium or cofactors in that way. Okay. Here, biotin is the coenzyme, and main rate limiting enzyme for fatty acid synthesis is acetyl-CoA carboxylase. Please remember, main rate limiting enzyme for fatty acid synthesis is acetyl-CoA carboxylase, and coenzyme is biotin. Here, carbon dioxide is added to acetyl-CoA. One carbon molecule is added to 2 carbon acetyl-CoA to form a 3 carbon malonyl-CoA. Hence, any carboxylation reaction is similar to carboxylation of pyruvate to form oxaloacetate. Little bit you have learned in carbohydrate metabolism, right? Here too it is similar, but here acetyl-CoA is getting converted to malonyl-CoA. Okay. And important key enzyme is acetyl-CoA carboxylase. It is a rate limiting enzyme. It requires biotin. Biotin, it is a member of B complex vitamin, and it also requires carbon dioxide and ATP. Here again, one more molecule of ATP are used, and it is allosterically regulated enzyme. Means citrate is positive regulated. That's why citrate is important. More and more citrate only, more and more acetyl-CoA, more and more acetyl-CoA only, more and more fatty acid synthesis. Please remember, the important regulator is citrate, and end product is palmitoyl-CoA is a negative regulator. That is, if more and more palmitoyl-CoA, less fatty acid synthesis. Please remember, because that is an endpoint regulation. You have learned it enzymes class, right? How endpoint, how last product form can inhibit key rate limiting enzyme. In that same process, palmitoyl-CoA is the end product of fatty acid synthesis that inhibits acetyl-CoA carboxylase enzyme. Because of that, fatty acid synthesis is lessened. See, here is the reaction here completely. ATP is converted to ADP. Carbon dioxide is transported to the acetyl-CoA carboxylase biotin complex, wherein it is forming acetyl-CoA biotin carbon dioxide carboxyl group complex that is transferred to acetyl-CoA to form malonyl-CoA, 3 carbon malonyl-CoA. Okay. Now, important complex is multi-enzyme complex. It is a fatty acid synthase complex. You have understood? Everyone have understood? Please.
Yes,
First
ma'am.
two stages. Okay, please. Next is fatty acid synthase complex. Okay, it exists as multi-enzyme complex. Fatty acid FAS complex is a multi-enzyme complex. It is a dimer, okay, with two identical monomeric subunits. Each subunit of the complex is organized into three domains with 7 enzymes. That is, it has 3 units. One unit is condensing unit, second unit is reduction unit, third unit is reducing unit. Second unit is reducing unit, third unit is releasing unit. Coming to one by one, condensing unit. Condensing unit, or it is domain 1. It is containing 3 enzymes or 2 enzymes on the whole, as acetyl transacylases and malonyl transacylases are grouped as one enzyme only. One more enzyme is condensing enzyme, that is ketoacyl ACP synthase. Next domain is reduction unit. It contains 4 enzymes: acyl carrier protein, beta ketoacyl reductase, dehydratase, enoyl reductase. Next, third domain is releasing unit. It contains 1 enzyme, thioesterase. Totally 7 enzymes are present. First unit, 2 enzymes. Second unit, 4 enzymes. Third unit, 1 enzyme. Totally 7 enzymes are incorporated into a one complex, that is multi-enzyme complex. See here, figure of multi-enzyme complex. You have to write you have to even in exam you have to draw figure of multi-enzyme complex in this way. It is a 3 units: condensing unit, reduction unit, and releasing unit. It is a dimer. Two here, one monomer, anti-parallel fashion they are arranged. See here, in anti-parallel here. In that way they are arranged. Enzymes are arranged. In condensing unit, you have condensing enzyme, acetyl transacyclase enzyme, malonyl transacyclase enzyme. Please remember here. One more is reduction unit. It has 4 enzymes: acyl carrier protein, keto reductase, enoyl reductase, dehydratase enzyme. Here, one important is acyl carrier protein is a polypeptide chain. It has phosphopantethine group and sulfhydryl group. It is sulfhydryl group of acyl carrier protein is linked to the cysteine group of condensing enzyme. That is important because intermediates are linked to acyl carrier protein here. That's what you have learned in the differences between beta oxidation and fatty acid synthesis. And last unit is releasing unit, that is thioesterase enzyme is present. In that way, 7 enzymes are present in 3 units. Each is a subunit. Again, each unit monomer can individually synthesize fatty acid one separately. That's why when 2 units are completely active, 2 fatty acids can be synthesized separately. What are the advantages of multi-enzyme complex? You have learned one more multi-enzyme complex in carbohydrate metabolism. What is that? Anyone can tell?
Pyruvate
Yes,
dehydrogenase.
yes. Good. In that way, here one more multi-enzyme complex, that is fatty acid synthase complex. What are the advantages of multi-enzyme complex? Because intermediates of the reaction can easy. In that way, they can interact with active sites of the enzymes in a better way because they are present in the same cytoplasm here. And one gene codes for all enzymes. So all enzymes are in equimolecular concentration and pathway can occur in an efficient way because again, so you can in other pathways that enzyme has to be transported from mitochondria to the cytoplasm or cytoplasm to mitochondria where that is required. Here, as they are present in a one complex, it is most advantageous and most efficiently it can take place. In that way, that is the advantage of multi-enzyme complex. Here, fatty acid synthase complex, FAS complex is a short question. It is first domain or condensing unit. It is the initial substrate binding site. The enzymes involved are beta ketoacyl synthase or condensing enzyme, acetyl transferase, and malonyl transferases enzyme. Second domain or reduction unit, it contains dehydratase enzyme, enoyl reductase enzyme, beta ketoacyl reductase enzyme, and acyl carrier protein. Acyl courier protein, here it is acting as coenzyme A. That is the difference, because it is carrying fatty acyl groups in thioester linkage. You have seen that linkage, right? How it is linked, sulfhydryl group are linked to the cysteine group of condensing enzyme. In that way, it is carrying the coenzyme. And third domain or releasing unit, it is involved in release of palmitate, and it contains thioesterase or deacylase enzyme. Coming to the main reactions, now there are actually 5 stages again in the third stage. In that, first is loading via thioester derivative, that is acetyl-CoA is first reaction we have learned. Acetyl-CoA is converting to malonyl-CoA in the presence of carboxylation bicarbonate, and 1 ATP is used. That is first reaction. Next, here is thioester derivative, that is acetyl-CoA combines with acyl carrier protein to form acetyl ACP in the presence of an enzyme acetyl transacylase. Next, malonyl-CoA combines with acetyl carrier protein to form malonyl-CoA in the presence of an enzyme malonyl transacylase. Next 4 reactions are specific, that is condensation of acyl carrier protein with malonyl acyl carrier protein to form acetoacetyl acyl carrier protein in the presence of condensing enzyme. Next reaction is reduction in the presence of NADPH, acetoacetyl ACP. It is utilizing 1 NADPH to form hydroxybutyryl ACP in the presence of an enzyme beta ketoacyl reductase. Next, beta hydroxybutyryl ACP is undergoing dehydration, that is H2O is removed to form crotonyl ACP to form beta in the presence of an enzyme beta hydroxyacyl ACP dehydratase. Next, crotonyl ACP is utilizing 1 more NADPH. It is undergoing reduction. Next, second reduction to form butyryl ACP to form enoyl is in the presence of an enzyme enoyl ACP reductase. Now, butyryl ACP is again from 4th reaction. Completely 7 times it is repeated. Each time 2 carbon units are added to finally form a 16 carbon palmitic acid. Now, these are in brief in this slide. You're seeing first reaction is condensation. Next is reduction. First reduction, dehydration. Next is second reduction. Now coming to one by one. Again in detail, you can learn here. The 2-carbon acetyl-CoA is transferred to acyl carrier protein of fatty acid synthase to form acetyl carrier protein. The enzyme is acetyl-CoA transacylase. It is one enzyme present in condensing unit. Now that acetyl unit is then transferred from acyl carrier protein to cysteine residue of condensing enzyme that you have seen in figure. Next, similarly, the enzyme malonyl-CoA ACP transacylase transfers malonyl-CoA to ACP to form malonyl ACP in the presence of malonyl ACP transacylase enzyme. Now, elongation phase of fatty acid synthesis starts with formation of acetyl ACP and malonyl ACP. What are the enzymes for that reaction? Acetyl transacylases, malonyl transacylases present in the condensing unit. In that way, here at the bottom of the slide, acetyl ACP combines with acyl carrier protein to form acetyl ACP. Similarly, malonyl ACP combines with ACP to form malonyl ACP. First condensation reaction. Acetyl ACP and malonyl ACP react to form acetoacetyl ACP. Here, carbon dioxide is removed in the presence of condensing enzyme. It forms beta ketoacyl ACP. Next is acetoacetyl ACP undergoes reduction, first reduction to form beta hydroxybutyryl ACP. It is undergoing first reduction utilizing 1 NADPH. That NADPH is obtained in the conversion of malate to pyruvate in the presence of malic enzyme, or it is obtained from HMP pathway. Here the enzyme is reductase, beta ketoacyl reductase present in the second domain or reduction unit. Next reaction is dehydration reaction. Beta hydroxybutyryl ACP is undergoing dehydrate in the presence of dehydratase enzyme, beta hydroxy acyl ACP dehydratase enzyme. H2O is removed to form crotonyl ACP or enoyl ACP. Next, last reaction is second reduction. Enoyl ACP, it is utilizing 1 more NADPH. It is undergoing reduction in the presence of enoyl reductase enzyme to form butyryl ACP. Here enzyme is enoyl ACP reductase. Now that butyryl ACP is starting material again for keep on adding to 2 carbons. That's why the carbon chain attached to ACP is transferred to 16 residue. Reactions 2 to 6 are repeated 6 more times. That is totally 7 times pathway takes place. Each time a fatty acid chain is lengthened by 2 carbon units obtained as malonyl CoA. At the end of 7 reactions, fatty acid synthesis is complete. In that way, a 16 carbon fully saturated fatty acid, namely palmitic acid, bound to ACP is produced. Now, the third unit, that is releasing unit, acts here in here, where palmitic acid bound to ACP, ACP is liberated and palmitic acid is separated from that in the presence of an enzyme, thioesterase or deacyl. In that way, fatty acid synthesis completes. Here you can see in this slide, acetyl-CoA carboxylation. Next, combination to acetoacetyl ACP and malonyl ACP, condensation reactions, reduction reactions, dehydration reaction, second reduction, butyryl ACP. Repeat 6 more times, total 7 times. Finally, palmityl ACP is formed. Palmityl ACP 16 carbon in the presence of thioesterase. Acyl ACP is separated and palmitic acid is separated. In that way, lipogenesis repeats. Fatty acid synthesis continues. Malonyl ACP combines with last end product, that is butyryl ACP, to form 6 carbon. Next 8 carbon, next 10 carbon. In that way, carbon chain lengthens by 2 carbons each time. Fatty acid synthesis is completed when palmityl ACP reacts with H2O in presence of thioesterase to form palmitic acid, and free ACP is liberated to be again utilized. What is the summary of de novo synthesis? The net reaction is 1-acetyl-CoA, only 1-acetyl-CoA, because remaining are added by malonyl CoA. 7 malonyl CoA, 14 NADPH. Why? Because at 2 reactions, NADPH are utilized. In that way, 1 palmitate, 7 carbon dioxide are liberated, 14 NADP are liberated, 8 CoA and 6 H2O are liberated. That is the net reaction of de novo synthesis of fatty acids. In that way, what are the substrates required? You have understood acetyl-CoA and NADPH are required. Acetyl-CoA is obtained from oxidation of pyruvate or oxidation of fatty acids or degradation of carbon atoms of certain fatty acids as ketogenic acid, or from ketone body again acetyl-CoA is formed. That's how you can understand in next class. Next, when keto body metabolism starts. Then what are the sources of secondary substrate NADPH? One is pentose phosphate pathway. Next is malic enzyme. You have understood pentose HMP pathway is the main source of NADPH. That's why in same organs fatty acid synthesis is taking place. From malic enzyme, you have understood in citrate transport pathway. From malate to pyruvate conversion, in that NADPH is generated. That's why for every molecule of acetyl-CoA, 1 molecule of NADPH is formed and it is generated in cytoplasm. That is the advantage of citrate transporter. Regulation shall continue in next class, ma. Already time. Clear? Students?
Yes, ma'am.
Shall continue in next class. Please inform others. Shall continue in tomorrow's class. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
morning, everybody. Good morning. Am I audible?
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, ma'am.
Morning, ma'am.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Morning,
Shall we
ma'am.
continue? So, artificial respiration and cardiopulmonary resuscitation. So, last class we had finished. What did we do in the last class?
Hypoxia, different
Hypoxia.
Yeah, carbon monoxide poisoning was the last part, right? Hypoxia, hypercapnia, asphyxia, drowning, carbon monoxide poisoning. So now coming to artificial respiration. So what is this artificial respiration? Where you are controlling the respiration artificially. The patient is not able to breathe properly. So you are controlling the respiration. So that is artificial respiration. So when is it required? So when there is sudden stoppage of breathing, like in drowning, electrocution, anesthetic accident, so extra dose of anesthesia, then carbon monoxide poisoning, strangulation in such cases. Also, when breathing is expected to stop gradually, like in paralysis of the muscles, in poliomyelitis, diphtheria, ascending paralysis. So, in all these cases. So why you need to give the respiration? Because tissues of brain will undergo irreversible damage if oxygen is not supplied for 5 minutes. So what are the methods of artificial respiration? Manual methods and mechanical methods. Manual is mouth-to-mouth breathing, then Holger-Nielsen technique, Schaefer's method, Sylvester method. So first one in that is mouth-to-mouth breathing, exhaled air ventilation. So all of you must have seen in various films, this is always shown mouth-to-mouth breathing for ventilation. So this is the manual method. So it can be, what is the benefit of this method? It can be applied quickly, simple, effective. So anybody can do it. And it provides adequate ventilation and expands the lung as well. So procedure is you should make the patient lie in supine position, clear the airway first. So any foreign material, if the person has drowned, there may be some grass or something in the mouth, remove all that material. Then draw the tongue forward. So it shouldn't fall back. Tongue shouldn't be falling back. So patient's neck is extended, nostrils should be closed. Then the resuscitator, the person who is giving this mouth-to-mouth breathing, should take a deep breath, then exhale into patient's airway. After tightly placing mouth over patient's mouth, or you can use a mask also. If mask is readily available, we can use the mask. So that will lead to expansion of chest. Then expiration occurs passively. So after giving the breath, so allow the chest to recoil. So that time expiration occurs. So this is repeated 12 to 16 times per minute. So till breathing returns. So how does it work? Because carbon dioxide is mainly present in the exhaled air. So when you're giving the breath, the carbon dioxide is present. So that will stimulate the respiratory centers, and expired air also contains 16% oxygen, which is sufficient to maintain the body functions. So second method is Holger-Nielsen method. So back pressure arm lift method. All this is not usually done. So here we have to make the patient lie prone and the face turned to one side, and you should be sitting at the head end. So can you see the picture?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Sitting at the head end and apply pressure on the back, that is over the chest area on the back. So that will lead to exhalation. Then hold the arms and pull it upwards. So that will lead to inhalation. Okay, exhalation and inhalation. Holger-Nielsen method, also known as back pressure arm lift method. So these tutorial questions you need to write in notebooks also. So your CR has asked that question. Harshita, is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
You need to write it, yeah. So each day one you can write. So that by next Thursday you'll finish all of them. So have you finished this week's? I mean last week's? Have you all written? Heart block, heart sounds and all that? Yes or no? I think nobody has
Yes,
written.
ma'am.
No answer means not written. So that will be checked. Don't take the tutorial questions lightly. So it will be checked. Marks is there for everything. So whatever you are doing, for everything marks is there. So don't take anything lightly. Next is Schaefer's method. So here also you make the patient lie down in prone position. So you will be sitting down towards the legs of the patient, then applying pressure on the loin area. So that will lead to exhalation. Then you have to leave the pressure, that will lead to inhalation. So this is Schaefer's method. Next, coming to the mechanical methods. So positive pressure method and negative pressure, intermittent positive pressure. One is negative, 1 second. This is positive pressure method. So usually used during surgery. Here lung is inflated by pumping air by applying positive pressure. So release of air will lead to expiration. So you are applying the positive pressure, increasing the pressure for inflating the lungs. One more thing is intermittent positive pressure ventilation. So modern day respirators, they use this intermittent positive pressure. So ventilators, so which we hear very commonly nowadays. So they are artificial respiration machines by which air or oxygen is pumped into the lungs through rubber tube that is connected to trachea. So here you can see the ventilator, which is connected through the mouth. It's inserted into the trachea, connected to the trachea. So it will give the required amount of air for inspiration, then there is exhalation. So this is the mechanical ventilator. It blows air or air with increased oxygen. So depending upon the patient requirement, you need to adjust that oxygen tension through tubes into the patient's airways. Then the endotracheal tube goes through patient's mouth and into the windpipe. So if the patient is not able to take food through mouth, definitely patient will not be able to take food through mouth in this condition. So nasogastric tube, so from the nose, Ryle's tube is passed into the stomach. So air flowing to the patient passes through a humidifier. So that humidification is very important. So we have learned in the first class, right? Which warms and moistens the air, conditioning of the air. So otherwise there will be damage to the alveoli. Then exhaled air flowing away from the patient. There are two separate tubes for inhaled air and exhaled air. This is the mechanical ventilator, which is commonly used in the hospitals. So next is negative pressure method. Here this was used long back, these methods. So positive, intermittent positive pressure is the one which is used in the ventilators. Alternate compression and relaxation of the chest wall by either Drinker's method. So he found that, Drinker, a person. So he has found it. So this is the Drinker's method. In 1938, he discovered it. So iron lung chamber, the whole body is placed inside a chamber, iron chamber. So this is how it was done in olden days. This is Bragg-Paul method on the right side, where hollow elastic rubber bag is wrapped around the chest. So these are all olden days techniques. Boyle's apparatus. So this is an automatic instrument where rate and depth of ventilation can be varied. So this is used, Boyle's apparatus. It was discovered by Edmund Gaskin Boyle in 1917 for anesthesia. So that also can be used for rate and depth, varying the rate and depth of ventilation. Boyle's apparatus. Next, coming to, so in artificial respiration, you have to know when you have to use it, when breathing stops. Then what are the types? Manual and mechanical. Manual is mouth to mouth, Holger Nielsen Schaefer's method. Mechanical is positive pressure and intermittent positive pressure ventilation, in which the ventilators come. Then the negative pressure is the olden days methods like Drinker's method, Bragg-Paul method, and Boyle's apparatus. So CPR. So what is the CPR? Basic life support. Have you finished this in your foundation course?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
What is
ma'am.
the ratio between compressions and breaths?
30 is to 2.
30 is to 2. Yes. So when do you need to give CPR, cardiopulmonary resuscitation? So artificial respiration, when are you giving? When respiration stops. Cardiopulmonary, both heart and respiration support. When are you giving? When both heart and respiration stop. Okay, so only if breathing has stopped, you don't start CPR. So CPR is started when both heart and respiration. How do you come to know whether both have stopped? What do you do for that?
Check the carotid pulse.
Yes, yeah, carotid pulse. Then rise of chest, whether the person is breathing or not. So ventricular, so when, in which conditions you will come across such a situation where heart and respiration stop? Electrocution, drowning, ventricular fibrillation. So in all such cases. So first you have to take care of the airway, open the airway, then mouth to, so then feel for carotid pulse if present. If carotid pulse is present, then you will continue only the respiration part, no compressions. So initial assessment, that is checking of pulse and breathing, should be over within 10 seconds. So if carotid pulse is not felt, then you have to start the chest compression. The sternum is depressed by 4 to 5 centimeter at the rate of 100 to 120 times per minute. Cardiac compression is alternated with mouth-to-mouth respiration. You can use the mask. So at the rate of 30:2. So as soon as you see a patient or a person falling, so what is the first step you have to check for?
Response.
Response. So shake the patient or shout, tap on the shoulder and ask, are you okay? No response, then immediately call emergency service. Then you have to check for breathing and pulse. So simultaneously, so breathing in the carotid pulse, then the chest rise you can observe at the same time. So if you feel there is no breathing, no pulse, immediately start chest compressions. So it should be 4 to 5 centimeter depth. It should go down, and you have to keep, where should you keep your hands? So how will you keep? Like this, the heel of one hand should be, and the other hand should hook around it, then place it where?
2 centimeters above the xiphoid process.
On the ribs. Should we place on the ribs?
Ma'am, 2 centimeters above the xiphoid process of the sternum.
Yeah, above the xiphoid process, so on the sternum. So not on the ribs. If you keep on the ribs, what is the danger?
Ribs will break, ribs fracture will occur.
Ribs, yes. So that is that will be the another complication along with cardiac arrest. So push hard and fast about twice per second, because it is 120, around 120 per minute. So watch for, then you have to give 2 breaths after 30 compressions, 2 breaths. So you can see in the first picture he is giving it with the mask, and you have to observe for chest rising. So you have to, what method do you use? Head tilt, chin lift. To open the airway, you have to do head tilt, chin lift method. Then keep the mask and blow into it. So there should be chest rise. Chest should rise. Visible chest rise should be there. Then only it means that the air you have blown in is sufficient and it has reached the lungs. So it should be given, each breath should be given in 1 second. So when you're giving compressions, what is happening to the heart? So it is releasing the blood. And every time you give compressions, you have to allow it to recoil also, so that it refills. So without filling, if you're going on simply compressing, then the blood won't come out, right? So you should allow for filling of blood also. So compressions, airway, breathing. So push hard and fast on the center of victim's chest. Tilt the victim's head back, lift. That is head tilt, chin lift method to open the airway. Then give mouth-to-mouth rescue breaths. So what are the features of high quality CPR? So if you are giving CPR compression, so it should be effective. Otherwise, there is no point in giving that compressions and breaths. So how you should give? Compression rate should be appropriate, at least 100 per minute. It's 100 to 120 per minute. Push hard and fast. So it should be hard as well as fast. Compression depth should be 1/3 the anteroposterior diameter of the chest, or 1.5 inches in infants, 2 inches in children. Allow proper chest recoil after each compression to allow for proper cardiac output. Minimize the interruptions for continuous brain and organ perfusion. So you should not interrupt in between. So you should do it continuously without interruption. So when there is fatigue, you have to change the role. One who is giving breaths can come for compressions. The compression person can go for breaths. So avoid excessive ventilation. So if you give excessive ventilation with lot of enthusiasm, if you blow all the air into the patient, then what happens? What will happen? It will prevent, because of venous return to the heart will decrease. If they are, there may be gastric insufflation. The air may enter into the stomach. It may also lead to vomiting, aspiration. Okay, so the ventilation should be just appropriate. What is the tidal volume? Around 500 ml. Okay, it should be only that. Precautions. So within 4 to 5 minutes, you have to start. Otherwise, why it is so important? Time is so important here. Why? Because the brain tissue will undergo irreversible damage within 4 to 5 minutes. So immediately, the earlier you start the compressions, the better. Should not sit or stand. The patient should not be made to sit and stand. There should not be pillow. Nothing should be given. You should not give water and all orally. Then the person may get aspirated. Feet and legs, you can raise the leg to increase the cardiac output. Pressure should not be applied over ribs, so that may lead to fracture. So these are the various artificial respiration manual methods. Holger-Nielsen, Schaefer's method. One more method is the Sylvester's method. So where you make the person lie supine position, apply pressure on the chest, then pull the arms back. So can you see that? That will lead to exhalation, inspiration, exhalation. Next, coming to other applied aspects, pulmonary edema. So collection of fluid in the alveoli. So I think already over, collection of fluid in the alveoli and interstitial spaces of lungs. So what are the causes of this edema? One is increased pulmonary capillary pressure. So it can occur in left ventricular failure, mitral valve disease. So mitral valve disease also is on the left side of the heart. So all this will lead to increase in pulmonary capillary pressure, the back pressure. Then pneumonia, infections, then harmful chemicals like chlorine, sulfur dioxide inhalation. So all this will lead to increased permeability. So what happens when there is pulmonary edema? The thickness of the respiratory membrane is increased. So what happens to diffusion? Decreases. Diffusion decreases. So this may, if there is marked edema, then it will lead to sudden death by suffocation. So there will be suffocation and the patient may die if it is not treated immediately. And coming to bronchial asthma, I think it's over. Asthma and emphysema was done in one of the classes. So once again, like a revision. So it is an inflammatory disease of bronchioles caused by hypersensitivity of bronchioles to foreign substances. So due to any allergy. Spasm of bronchial smooth muscle. So what are the features here? One is spasm of the bronchial smooth muscle, inflammation of the bronchial wall, and secretion of thick mucus. So all this is causing obstructive type of disease. Airway obstruction, inflammation, and hyperresponsiveness. These are the three main features of bronchial asthma. So IgE levels are raised. Okay, proteins from eosinophils. So eosinophils are in the area where there is inflammation. So these eosinophils will release some proteins which will damage the airway further. The leukotrienes released by eosinophils and mast cells, they are also responsible for bronchoconstriction. So what are the symptoms here? Dyspnea, cough, main symptoms. So difficulty in breathing. What is dyspnea? Difficulty in breathing. Then there is cough. With repeated attacks, there may be progressive fatigue, even respiratory arrest. So what are the things we see in the pulmonary function test? Reduction in tidal volume, vital capacity, and forced expiratory volume in first second. So it's an obstructive type of disease. That is why FEV1 is decreased. Increase in functional residual capacity and residual volume. Why there is increase? Because it's not able to exhale properly. So air remaining in the lungs becomes more. What is the treatment? Beta-2 adrenergic agonists. What do they do? Bronchodilation. Inhaled and systemic steroids, they also help in bronchodilation, relieve the inflammation. Then agents that block leukotrienes, like montelukast and all, they are anti-leukotriene drugs, so which will also give relief. Next, coming to pulmonary emphysema. So what does it mean? Excess of air in the lungs. So there is loss of lung elasticity and replacement of this alveoli with large air sacs. So it is a complex obstructive destructive process of lung, and it is a consequence of long-term smoking. Usually there is history of long-term smoking. This emphysema leads to, so the elasticity is lost. The alveoli, they coalesce with one another. So what does this emphysema lead to? Airway obstruction, destruction of alveolar walls, and the smoke. So the person is a smoker, no? So that will cause increase in macrophages, that they will release chemicals which attract other leukocytes to the lungs. So because of that inflammatory reaction, leukocytes will release proteases, mainly the elastase, which will attack the elastic tissue and damage it. Usually alpha-1 antitrypsin will inactivate this protease, but this is also inhibited by oxygen radicals released by leukocytes. So there is imbalance, protease, antiprotease, that is elastase, alpha-1 antitrypsin imbalance. Elastase is increased, alpha-1 antitrypsin decreased. So what happens? Loss of elastic tissue, lung tissue damage. Next, coming to pneumonia. So it is an inflammatory condition of lung in which alveoli are filled with fluid and inflammatory cells. Here you can see, this is normal alveoli. So this is pneumonia with fluid and cells in the alveoli. This is emphysema. You can see the loss of alveolar walls. So what happens because of that? There is consolidation of lungs. Consolidation means solidification of the lungs. So common cause for pneumonia is bacterial pneumonia that caused by pneumococci. But it could be even viral. Viral pneumonia is also there, and non-infective sometimes due to chemicals and radiation injury to lungs. That also may lead to pneumonia. What are the symptoms here? Fever, rise in respiratory rate, heart rate, and hypocapnia. Because of increased respiratory rate, hypocapnia. In later stages, there is retention of carbon dioxide. When respiratory effort decreases in later stages, then there is retention of carbon dioxide and hypercapnia. Finally, cerebral hypoxia may lead to delirium. It is confusion, illusion, hallucination, disorientation. So hyperexcitability and loss of memory. So this illusion, hallucination and all are like psychiatric illnesses. Illusion means you think a rope to be a snake. That is illusion. Hallucination. Anybody knows what is hallucination? Some people have that hallucination. Even if you show some evidence, they're not ready to believe. Please mute yourselves. I can hear some male voices.
ఏదో తక్కువ ఇస్తారు ఎంత కష్టపడ్డాడమ్మా నువ్వు కష్టపడ్డావు దాటి బాగుండి ఏబిసి అంటే గొప్ప కదా
రెండు తీసుకుని తెలియదా తెలియదు కష్టపడి సంపాదించినాను కూడా ఎవరికిందన్నా
So who is that who is not muting?
ఇంత బాగా తెలియదు కొన్నారు కూడా
Yeah, even if you provide evidence, the person is having hallucination, like visual hallucination, auditory hallucination. There is nothing, but still the person can see. Some people see ghosts and all. No, it is not there actually, but the person is able to see. So that is visual hallucination. Auditory means person is able to hear. Some people say I can hear somebody talking and all that. So though there is nobody talking, that is hallucination. Illusion means something is there. A rope is there, you think it is a snake. So that is illusion, hallucination. Okay. Then disorientation, you know, hyperexcitability. So increased excitation, loss of memory. So finally, it may lead to death. Atelectasis. What is atelectasis? Collapse of alveoli with the absence of air in involved parts. That is known as atelectasis. It could be due to any cause: obstruction of bronchus, lack of surfactant, pressure from pleural cavity. So any disease may finally lead to collapse of alveoli. That is known as atelectasis. So pleural effusion. So what is the meaning? Accumulation of large amount of fluid in the pleural cavity. That is pleural effusion. Pneumothorax. Air in the pleural cavity. Then hydrothorax. Again, fluid in the pleural cavity. Hemothorax. Blood in the pleural cavity. So these are some of the terms. Tuberculosis. So you might, it's very common in India, tuberculosis. So immediately after birth, which vaccination is given for this? So even you would have taken, no? The R.
BCG.
BCG, yes. So it's chronic infection of the lung parenchyma caused by an acid-fast bacteria called Mycobacterium tuberculosis. So bacteria called Mycobacterium tuberculosis. So here the infected area is infiltrated with macrophages, and what will happen is fibrous tissue will wall off this area. So whichever area is infected. So those areas are called tubercles. In later stages, what happens? There will be fibrosis. So the lung tissue is replaced by fibrous tissue. So this will reduce the lung tissue. The diffusion capacity is also greatly reduced. So it should be treated immediately. Tuberculosis. So this finishes the applied aspects. Next, coming to the environmental physiology. So environmental means one is high altitude. So as you go to higher and higher altitudes, so what will happen to the pressure of the air? Pressure like oxygen mainly.
Decreases.
Decreases. So if you are going below sea level,
It increases.
so you are facing increased pressure as you're going below the sea. So as you're going above to higher altitudes, you are facing decreasing pressures. So how will it affect the body? So what is this high altitude? A height in excess of 10,000 feet above sea level is defined as high altitude. So here, what are the main features at high altitude? The barometric pressure decreases. Okay, so when, if it is 760 millimeter mercury at sea level, it becomes 630 millimeter mercury at 5,000 feet. So like that, it goes on decreasing. Total pressure of air also decreases. Then what is the other important thing here? pH2O, that is partial pressure of water vapor and partial pressure carbon dioxide remain constant, because The pH2O is dependent mainly on the body temperature. So when it doesn't change, even pH2O won't change. How much is this pH2O?
It is 47
47 millimeter mercury.
mercury.
And PCO2 also, until the metabolism is occurring normally in the body. So PCO2, alveolar PCO2 remains same. How much it is?
It is 40 mm.
40
40
mm of
millimeter
mercury.
mercury. So these two remain same. Then what should decrease? Only PO2 and PN2 have to decrease with height. So composition of air does not change. That is, the percentage of gases remain the same up to about 30,000 feet. So pH2O is in alveolar air determined by body temperature. PCO2 by metabolic production of body. They remain constant. So these two, PO2, PN2 only decrease. So as you are going to higher altitudes, what you experience is known as hypoxic hypoxia, because the air which you are breathing in is having low PO2. And the effects of this hypoxic hypoxia depends on rate at which it develops, like whether you are rapidly ascending or slowly ascending, taking rest at different levels, or level of altitude. So how high you are going, whether 10,000 feet to 20,000 feet. Then duration of exposure. So how long you will be exposed to that high altitude. So salient features of hypoxic hypoxia at high altitude. So type of ascent, if you are ascending rapidly, then degree of hypoxia will be severe, and there is no time for compensatory mechanisms to act because you are ascending rapidly. So it will be nil. Effects of hypoxia will be severe. In slow ascent, degree of hypoxia will be less. Compensatory mechanisms will be present to some extent. What are those compensatory mechanisms known as hypoxia compensatory mechanisms?
Accommodation, acclimatization.
And long-term acclimatization. Then effects of hypoxia will be moderate. So permanent residents at high altitude. So some people stay at high altitudes, high altitude natives. In them, degree of hypoxia is least. So what is that mechanism? Acclimatization. So their body has undergone acclimatization, not just accommodation. So body's compensatory mechanisms are well developed. Effects of hypoxia nil due to acclimatization. Now coming to stages of hypoxic hypoxia. So first stage is stage of indifference. So that is up to 10,000 feet altitude when you go, and PO2 is still more than 60 millimeter mercury, then there are no symptoms. Stage of reaction will start when you are going above 10,000 feet. So 10,000 feet to 15,000 feet, there is effect of moderate hypoxia. PO2 will be between 40 and 60 millimeter mercury. So the symptoms of hypoxia, like on the cardiovascular symptoms, could be tachycardia, hypertension. Respiratory symptoms are increased ventilation. And early CNS involvement will include impaired judgment. So whenever there is hypoxia, effect is similar to what?
Methyl alcohol intoxication.
Ethyl alcohol consumption. So impaired judgment, overconfidence, excessive talking, reduction in visual acuity, not able to see properly, emotional outbursts like laughing, crying, and all that you can see. So this is between, after you go above 10,000 feet. Stage of disturbance is between 15,000 and 20,000 feet altitude. PO2 is very less, 30 to 40 millimeter mercury. So this, all the symptoms will be exaggerated, and CNS involvement also will be aggravated. There will be severe hypoxia and lead to death as well. PO2 is very low and you are not having any oxygen support. So effects of high altitude during rapid ascent. So here you can see various pressure. So up to 5,000, 10,000. Usually no effects are seen except at night. There may be some reduction in visual capacity. Rapid ascent up to 10,000 feet is safe. Is a safe zone of ascent. Okay. After that, what happens when the alveolar PO2 becomes less than 60, that is 55 and all, saturation also becomes 85%. Effects of hypoxia develop, which manifest in the form of tachycardia, hypertension, increase in pulmonary ventilation. Further higher you go, what is happening? The above changes plus hypoxic symptoms due to involvement of CNS. Then if it is up to 20,000 feet, hypoxic symptoms due to involvement of CNS aggravate. Percentage oxygen saturation falls below 60%, it will produce unconsciousness. So between 25 and 30,000 feet, oxygen therapy has to be started. So therefore it is called critical survival altitude. So 25 to 30,000 feet. So at very high altitudes, what has to be done? So barometric pressure falls to 47 and water will occupy all the pressure. So above 40,000 or 45,000 feet, you have to create an artificial atmosphere in a pressurized cabin. So, and in such a cabin, one can go up to any altitude. So pressurized cabin. So even in aircrafts and all, you will see cabin pressure. So pressurized cabin. So in only if that is there, we'll be able to survive. Coming to clinical syndromes due to high altitude. So people who go to high altitude may experience some of the syndromes, clinical syndromes. So they are high altitude pulmonary edema, acute mountain sickness, chronic mountain sickness. So first coming to high altitude pulmonary edema. What is this high altitude pulmonary edema? So when a person rapidly ascends to a height of more than 10,000 feet and engages in heavy physical work during first 3 to 4 days of rapid ascent, then you will see this high altitude pulmonary edema. So when do you see? When a person rapidly ascends to a height of more than 10,000 and engages in some physical work within first 2 days. Or a person who is staying at sea level will go to high altitude. That means a person who is a native of high altitude will stay in at sea level for some time, then again rapidly ascends to high altitude. So in them also you can see this high altitude pulmonary edema. So what is the main feature here? Pulmonary edema. So hypoxia, which is getting aggravated by work, will lead to increased permeability of the pulmonary capillaries, which is causing edema. Also, there is increased sympathetic activity. So what is the cause of increased sympathetic activity? Here we can see increased sympathetic activity is causing the pulmonary edema mainly. So increase in sympathetic activity is due to hypoxia first. Hypoxia causes increased sympathetic activity. So VMC will be, what is VMC? Vasomotor center, yes. Then cold, because every 1,000 feet high, there is decrease in temperature by 2 degrees centigrade. So cold also will cause sympathetic stimulation. Then even increased physical work, that will also lead to increased sympathetic activity. So all these factors will lead to increase in sympathetic activity. Increased sympathetic activity will cause vasoconstriction, correct, through vasomotor center. Then there is increase in pulmonary capillary hydrostatic pressure because of vasoconstriction, increased pulmonary capillary hydrostatic pressure. So whenever capillary hydrostatic pressure increases, it will drive out the fluid from the pulmonary capillaries. So this will lead to pulmonary edema. So what is the treatment? So rest and oxygen therapy. So you should not be involved in heavy physical work as soon as you ascend to high altitude. Then also calcium channel blockers like nifedipine will lower the pulmonary artery pressure. So even that can be given. Next, coming to acute mountain sickness. So So this occurs when a person ascends to high altitude in 1 or 2 days for first time, after 8 to 24 hours of arrival, and lasts for 4 to 8 days. So what are the various features here? Nausea, vomiting, headache, irritability, insomnia, breathlessness, all this is due to hypoxia. And there will be cerebral edema and alkalosis. So cerebral edema and alkalosis is causing all these symptoms. So why is there cerebral edema? Because of decreased arterial PO2. What will happen? Why is arterial PO2 decreased? Because it is high altitude. So that will lead to arteriolar dilatation. So which will lead to increase in capillary pressure and transudation. So it will leak, the fluid will leak out of the capillaries because of the dilatation. So that will lead to cerebral edema in the brain. So hypoxia will cause cerebral arteriolar dilatation and transudation of the fluid, leading to cerebral edema. So why is there alkalosis? Because of increased ventilation. Carbon dioxide is washed out. That is why there is alkalosis. So how do you treat? For cerebral edema, you have to give glucocorticoids, steroids, or calcium channel blockers. For alkalosis, acetazolamide. What is this acetazolamide? Carbonic anhydrase inhibitor. So this will inhibit the carbonic anhydrase, decreases the hydrogen and increases the bicarbonate excretion, so that alkalosis is corrected. Okay, so the treatment will involve giving steroids and acetazolamide, correction of cerebral edema and alkalosis. So decreased PO2 will lead to stimulation of the peripheral chemoreceptors, increased ventilation, carbon dioxide washout, decreased alveolar PCO2, so leading to decreased hydrogen concentration and alkalosis. The last one syndrome is chronic mountain sickness. So it's also known as Monk's disease. So some long-time residents of high altitude may also develop symptoms due to low PO2, though they are long-term residents. So when can this occur? If this can occur, in long-term residents, we think that they are already acclimatized, but they can also develop symptoms sometimes. This is mainly either due to renal failure, so some other disease which is contributing. Renal failure, then what will happen? pH will not be regulated, not able to excrete acid or alkali. Then decrease in sensitivity of the peripheral chemoreceptors. Okay, so this also will lead to increase in pulmonary ventilation, which cannot be maintained. So you cannot maintain increased pulmonary ventilation. If the sensitivity of the peripheral chemoreceptors to hypoxia decreases, then what will happen? Cannot be maintained. What cannot be maintained? Ventilation cannot be maintained. Even the cardiovascular regulatory mechanism, if there is any disease of the heart or lung, then also all the compensatory mechanisms will be in danger. The compensatory mechanisms cannot work well if the person is already suffering from some heart disease or lung disease. So in such cases, this becomes unmasked. Whatever acclimatization had happened, it cannot continue any longer because of other problems like renal problems or heart problems or lung problems. So compensatory mechanisms don't work well. Then there will be symptoms even in acclimatized individuals. Extreme polycythemia, cyanosis, malaise, means malaise fatigue is almost same. Then exercise intolerance. They should be immediately moved to lower altitude. Okay, chronic mountain sickness. So what are the compensatory mechanisms? Accommodation and acclimatization. So this we have already finished. Accommodation and acclimatization. So we'll continue in the next class. So can anyone summarize what we learned today? Roll number 69, appear on screen, please. Roll number 69. Where is roll number 69? Absent? Okay, you are sitting with the mask.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, can you summarize? You can see and tell.
Okay, ma'am.
No, but come on the screen. I want to see you.
1 minute, ma'am.
Yeah, start. Fast.
Yes, ma'am. About pulmonary edema, ma'am.
Pulmonary. Okay,
precautions.
beginning. Artificial.
Artificial respiration, ma'am.
Yeah. Then
And CPR, ma'am.
CPR. Okay. Next, I'll ask somebody else. 100. Roll number
And
100.
precautions.
Yeah, 69. Okay. Next, 100. Roll number 100. Roll number 100. Missing. Who is roll number 100? Where is roll number 100? Absent. 101. Not there. Where is 101?
Yes, ma'am, I'm present.
Who is this, 101 or 100?
101 Afifa, ma'am.
Okay. Continue. She told artificial respiration, CPR. What were the other topics we did today? Come on the screen, please. Put on the video. I want to see 101. Who is this, Anusha? What is your number, Anusha?
6, ma'am.
Are you 101?
No, ma'am.
Okay, where is 101? Come on the screen fast. Why are you wasting time? CRs?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, then I'll mark 100, 101, both of them absent. Okay.
Ma'am, I will come 1 minute, ma'am. I will come
Who
on
is
screen.
that?
101, ma'am.
Okay. 100 is absent. You don't have to come to Tirupati. You have to just appear on the screen. I don't think you can do it today. Okay, Anusha, you only tell me.
Artificial respiratory methods, ma'am.
Yeah, CPR. Then,
Holgers-Nelson methods,
yeah.
mechanical methods and manual methods. And then
Yeah, next. Pulmonary edema,
emphysema,
emphysema, bronchial asthma, tuberculosis, pneumonia. Then, high altitude physiology, like what happens at high altitude, effects of hypoxia, and 3 syndromes. What are they? High altitude pulmonary edema,
and chronic
acute mountain sickness, and chronic Mountain sickness. Okay. So I'll stop today. Tomorrow also I am taking the class. What is the time tomorrow? 10 to 11, no? Tomorrow's class 10 to 11. So I'll be taking from 10 to 11 tomorrow. Please read and come. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
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 Thank you, ma'am.